Good morning, grade 8. We're back in science again, and this is density. And I brought our density column that we made in class the other day. And last night, just for fun, I added a couple things to our density column to see where they'd land. So I'll show you a couple things. On the top, you'll see there's a ping pong ball. If you look right here, you can see some things floating in here. They're floating in the dish soap, and that is popcorn kernels. And then if you look right up in here, there's a little blob in there you can see. That's a cherry tomato. And at the very bottom, you'll see there's something right here. That's a bolt made of steel. So things land in certain places depending on their density. Now I brought with me today some sugar cubes, and I also brought some marshmallows, both made out of sugar. Now what does that have to do with density? Well, density is a physical property that every substance has their own specific density. Now sugar cubes are made of sugar, and so is marshmallows. But sugar cubes, the particles in the sugar cubes are much closer together, so sugar cubes are much denser than marshmallows, where it's mostly just whipped sugar and there's a lot of air in there. So a lot of difference there. So they each have their own density, and you can see in different states things do have a different density. So just some things we're going to do with density. So you might ask yourself, well, this is really cool, but what does density have to do with chemistry? And what does it have to do with science, and why is it important? Well, it's important because density can be used both in the laboratory and out in the environment to help separate things. For example, when there's an oil spill and we want to get oil off the ducts or off the rocks or out of the water, we use the property of density to do that. And when we want to do chemical experiments in the lab as well. So I brought a couple things to show you today so you can see how that works. So I'm just going to move this out of the way. And first of all, we're going to start with, we'll move our light out of the way as well. We're going to start with just water. And what I did was, I took some rocks and sand and I mixed them with some oil, sort of to simulate what it would be like if there was an oil spill, for example. So what I'm going to do, now there's no way that I could separate this apart from each other now. I just couldn't get them apart. But watch what happens if I pour the whole thing into here. You'll see what happens. You can see the oil and the rocks are starting to separate. At the bottom, the rocks are separating out, and you can see big globs of oil are coming off the surface of the rocks and moving to the top of our water and separating in between. And if we left that long enough, even though this is a bit cloudy where the water was now, they would all separate out, so the rocks would be at the bottom and the oil would be at the top. I'm going to put that to the side and we'll have a quick look at it before we're done today and just see what's happened in the next couple minutes. So the last thing I want to show you about density. So here I have a bottle, and in this bottle on the bottom is a very concentrated salt solution, and on the top is plain water. I colored it just so you could see the difference between the two. So what I'm going to do is I have this egg, and I colored it as well so it would make it easier to see. And I'm just going to put that into our jar and we'll see what happens. All right, so there we have our egg, and our egg goes in, and it goes and it sinks through the normal tap water that's colored red, but it sinks through it, but then it stops just at the top of the concentrated salt solution. And why would that be, do you think? Well, the salt solution is going to be much denser, isn't it? It's got so many more salt particles in it, whereas our tap water has none at all. So once the egg reaches the salt solution, it can float. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it? The egg is actually hard-boiled. So on your flip grid this week, I have a picture there for you to look at. And it's a picture of a person floating on the Dead Sea reading a book. They're just floating. Nothing's holding them up. And I want you to respond and tell me why you think they're able to float on top of the water and use your particle theory of matter that you learned in grade 7, and explain to me why it is that that person can float. And you have 5 minutes. You can use whatever tools are there on the flip grid to explain your thinking on that. And I look forward to seeing your video. Okay, let's have a quick look at our separation of rocks from oil before we go. All right, so there he is. You can see that it's already much clearer. And look, some of the oil is still coming off. So that's why density is important. It's an important thing that we can use in science and we can use in engineering. So I look forward to seeing your videos, and it was nice to see you again this week. Thanks so much. Goodbye.